I'll give you a quick introduction of the company. I know we have been working with TCG for about a year now. In general, I've met quite a few people through that and some individual opportunities, but over the past probably about the past 3 to 4 months, I've had a couple of real nice opportunities that have closed with TCG agents. So encouraged by that, want to make sure people know that there are options. I do think we represent somewhat of a niche compared to some of your other products. Satellite's not something you're going to sell as a broadband connectivity to a small business in a metropolitan area, but anywhere that has anything for backup communications, Internet of Things, machine to machine, we can pretty much hit anywhere in North America as well as South America. So from a standpoint of enterprise businesses, government, those type things, we do provide some good options. So what I'd like to do is give you a quick intro of us. We won't spend a lot of time on that, but really get into the solutions and some of what I just spoke about, and also allow you to ask any questions. So, I mean, the big thing for me is to be interactive. I do have a few slides, but be talking more, but I'll certainly allow you to talk and ask questions as they come up. And of course, at the end, we can recap anything else. So let me get started on that. I think I mentioned previously, what we're going to try to accomplish today as far as my part. And then looking at it, we are in Petaluma. If you haven't been out there, it's about 35 miles north of San Francisco. So we own a facility there. The first picture you saw on the screen was our antenna farm. And essentially what you see with those big antennas is they connect to different satellites. So we operate on multiple satellites that primarily are going to cover the North America, South America, Caribbean, those kind of locations. These are geosynchronous, which essentially means that they operate above the equator, along the equator. They're like 22,000 miles up in the air. So they cover a wide range, but they don't cover the entire globe because the globe's round, right? So if you needed a customer who had service internationally, I can essentially help with that. I'd be working with a partner company who might have service in the Middle East or Asia or places like that. I will say most of my time, though, is spent working with Canadian and U.S. companies and some in Mexico and the Caribbean. As far as a network operations center, we have a 24/7 staff that's operated by folks who work in Petaluma. We don't outsource that. It's a privately owned company. We've been in business for 20 years. So we have a great track record as far as design. We started off as an engineering firm building people's teleports, and we've transitioned into this over the past 15 years. Spoke a little bit about the NOC. I do think it's important in regards to what they're doing. They're monitoring sites 24/7, of course, to make sure they're operational. Again, we're the transport side, right? So, I mean, if the satellite connection is up, regardless if it's broadband or machine to machine, it is important that someone's taking a look at it. And so we're doing any kind of proactive troubleshooting if there's something that is not up. And we're also a company, when you think of, people talk about redundancy and talk about backup plans, we have a fairly robust one ourselves. We have 3 actual teleports in the United States. Primary one, which I was showing you in Petaluma, we have a brand new facility which we're building out in Las Cruces, New Mexico. And then we have a redundant facility in Norcross, Georgia, which is just north of Atlanta. And when you think about locations, when we're dealing with big companies, they want to know what geographic diversity we have as well. So if something, earthquake hits Petaluma, knocks you guys off the map, what happens then? Well, services roll over to this facility in Las Cruces, or it rolls over to our facility in Atlanta. So we have a robust backup plan as well. And then also what people think about with satellite a lot is you'll think about what happens with rain. I have satellite TV. If it rains really hard, I lose connectivity. We have a much more robust service than that to begin with. This is 2-way, transmit and receive. But we also have our facilities located in places that don't rain a lot, minus Norcross. But the primary facility is in Petaluma, and the secondary facility is essentially in the desert. So, I mean, that's one of the things to have strong reliability. You need to have a hub that's located in fairly dry regions, or ones that don't receive the thunderstorms that you associate with the Northeast and the Southeast during the spring and summer. And so, back into what do we do? So, effectively, if you ask me who am I targeting, who am I looking to sell services to, I'm primarily not looking to sell broadband primary service to a small to medium-sized business. So So I kind of want to get that out there because I do get a lot of questions regarding that. We sell broadband services and we will sell primary, but if you have a site that's maybe can't get Comcast or has a problem with Verizon with cellular or something like that, I'm looking for an inexpensive option to give a 2 or 3 person place primary internet. I'm probably going to be a pretty expensive option. Okay, so when I sell primary broadband, I'm selling it to folks who are probably a medium to large business. Maybe they have mobile applications where they have to go from place to place and have a broadband connection. And then also, just folks that, they're on an island, right? I mean, they don't have fiber, they don't have anything. But if it's just someone in a metropolitan area, that's not really our focus. That's not where we're gonna win opportunities. But that can be said, from a backup scenario, we are perfect for anywhere. And the first thing I'll start with is that satellite itself is a diverse path for any of the local infrastructure, whether that's fiber, T1s, cellular, whatever it might be. And so if you lose connectivity, regardless of how many carriers you have coming into a building, there's some ILEC with the central office, there's some fiber route that's coming in or whatnot. If you lose those, if you have this solution, this is a fixed site solution in place prior to that, you can reroute your data, voice, or video over the satellite connection and maintain business. So think of firms like financial institutions, healthcare, hospitals is a really big player for us, EOCs for accounting, emergency 911, those kind of things. Most of those folks do consider satellite as a more robust form of redundancy. It might be the 3rd, maybe even the 4th tier of redundancy they have in place, but they're thinking what happens if an event like Hurricane Irma comes, and while it did not have the biggest impact maybe the Weather Channel was predicting, it very well could have. And for Harvey example, with all the flooding, you had central offices that were lost, you had cell towers that were lost. And our service was used quite extensively for that storm event. And if they have this in place, you basically are failing over for either voice or data or both for that matter. So example we have on the picture, just seeing that's a 1.8 meter antenna. That's not necessarily a small unit. We also do 1.2 meters, but it supports a decent amount of bandwidth for their applications to stay alive. And people always talk about hurricanes. That gets people excited in the southeast, especially in the Gulf Coast. But I do this across the country and into Canada, because the reality is it's not a storm that's going to probably impact them the most. It's a fiber cut. It's an AT&T or a Verizon or a Quest or CenturyLink having some form of issues that prevent them from being able to make calls or being able to reach the internet. And again, this is a 24/7 up. It's meant only for backup, but it's always there. So I view it as kind of an insurance policy. And one of the things that's helpful for us from a pricing standpoint too is that we do a flat fee rate. It's not a case where we charge one rate and then once you use it, we kill you with charges. This is something that essentially they can budget easily, and hopefully they don't have to use it, but if they do, it's there for them for seamless backup. And I mentioned a little bit, what I would say probably depending on the industry, you certainly have like financial companies probably first concerned about data, reaching back to a data center or whatever it might be. Or some of the oil and gas companies and utilities maybe are concerned about getting the monitoring information back, so it's small bits of traffic. And then healthcare and EOCs are really concerned about the voice calls. So you have one terminal on site that actually can handle both. We can do QoS for prioritizing voice over data, any of the things you could expect with doing MPLS or T1s or those type things. I'll give you an example of a healthcare company I work with. They have hospitals all across the United States. One of the things that they have done from our standpoint is they want to be able to back up their voice exclusively. So basically the solution we have in place for them allows them to have up to 100 concurrent calls at any given time. And with this, we are actually tied directly into their PBX. Whether that's one voice, it's a legacy TDM PBX, whatever it might be, we figure out a way to do an interconnect with that device in the hospital. And it gives them some great capabilities. Essentially, they don't have to have different handsets inside the facility. if they have Cisco or Via, whatever it might be, as far as their Polycom handsets for that matter. Effectively, if they lose their primary telecom circuit, whether that's a PRI or that's SIP, they're able to then fail over to the satellite connectivity. And so there's different ways to interconnect, but essentially, if you do the configuration up front, you have a great opportunity to allow yourself to pick up the phone, make an outbound call and inbound call without having any real concerns. Yes?
What's the latency on that?
Yeah, so no, they're geosynchronous satellites. So I mean, there's a physics aspect of it. It's 500 milliseconds to 550 milliseconds round trip. Now, I'll tell you right now, as far as a QoS and prioritization that's set up, I can tell anyone in this room, if you pick up a phone and use it over that type system, you might think that you're going to hear this big delay. You do not. It's not a traditional handheld satellite phone where people say, I talk, I wait for a second, they call back. It is seamless, and call quality is actually better than anything that you would likely see over cellular. It is set up from a standpoint of being a high priority item on the satellite network. But there is latency. Anytime someone asks about satellite, that is the case. There is TCP acceleration that's built into the modems as well as the hub to assist, and there's certainly things you can do with WAN optimization. But for voice, basically what's built into the software and the firmware aspect of it does provide a very high quality voice. Any other questions on how we deliver that part? Okay. So back to this aspect, as far as tying into the PBX, I mean, essentially it's simplicity for the user. They can easily make outbound calls. And I will tell you honestly, I'm a salesperson, be the first to admit that, but the reality is, we have accounts that might only be down for an hour with their primary telco. We'll see a jump in CDR logs that show they made, 200-300 calls in that period of time. And you'll call and ask what happened, and a lot of times they didn't know. So if you set this up properly in the beginning with their telecom, PBX vendor, whoever it might be in the facility, we have the opportunity to make that work seamlessly, and that's the goal. On inbound calls, AT&T or CenturyLink, they have the number, they own the number. So the accounts can set up some, like Crisis Link, I believe is the proper name for AT&T's, it's for everybody else. It could be different, but effectively you can forward a number to one we assign from our gateway as well. I have a lot of different ideas I can do on the back end as far as how to set it up. I mean, I know another one of the vendors here has a hosted PBX solution. I can get them out to the internet back to that solution as well. So there's not one way that fits everything. So I mean, I just need to basically have a general idea of how they want those calls routed. They could bring PRIs into X2n set. They can have a SIP gateway to X2n set. They can use mine. I can terminate calls for them if need be. So we have a lot of flexibility in that aspect. And it's scalable. So if you have large facility, 500 simultaneous calls might be a lot, but for a call center, it's not. I mean, there's plenty of call centers that have to take a look at what can I do to support, several hundred concurrent calls. So that's one of those things that I know for certain if they can't make or receive phone calls at a call center, their business is pretty much in trouble, right? So, I mean, you get that right away. 911 center, someone like that, if they can't make calls, people's lives are in danger. Same with hospitals. So, I mean, it is something that is certainly, you don't want to say they have to use it, but it is very impactful if they don't have some form of redundancy that gets them out to making those calls. And the next couple of slides are going to be different alternatives to just tying into a PBX. Because one of the first questions someone will ask, what happens if my PBX dies? Well, the reality is if you have it only tied into the PBX, then it's not going to work, right? So we have to look at other options beyond just that. And some people have just different preferences. So, I mean, I don't want to say that that's the only thing we do. I mean, when you look at the standpoint of a satellite connection, we effectively can provide just independent handsets. These can be analog phones, these can be SIP phones. We are going to convert everything to IP over the satellite connection, but there's plenty of devices and equipment out there that allows you to convert analog to IP, or just put IP phones out there. So I don't know how well you can see the actual display there as far as what the drawing is, but essentially what we're trying to show is that effectively what the route would be. It's connecting to a satellite modem, which is the silver box in the left corner, which in turn has an antenna on the roof or on top of a trailer or a mobile unit connects to the satellite down to our teleport and hits the PSTN that direction, or goes out to the internet to hit a hosted PBX solution, whatever it might be. And so from our standpoint, if you have a facility that already has, basically jacks all throughout the facility, I just take this phone that we provide, I plug it in a jack in the administrative office, if it's a hospital, the emergency room, if it's 911 center, the EOC, wherever it might be that's important for them to be able to make calls. You're not going to have one phone for every one they already have, right? You're going to think of these phones as something that I can do separate, like a red phone. I think has everybody heard the term red phone before for a hospital or whatever? Similar concept, right? And you can, when I'm thinking of what's independent, this is independent of the PBX. It's not tied into anything on the local infrastructure. We can assign them a DID number. They can make and receive phone calls to that location. And it's scalable, so I mean, whether you have one or whether you have 50 of these things, it's possible to have that kind of scale and size. In the same set, well, how do I do with Hardline? I just mentioned red phones. What's the one thing that's nice about a red phone? It's not powered. It's copper lines. It's really, people say, well, this will never go anywhere. Well, that's not true. I mean, the central office goes offline or floods, it's not going to work. But assuming you lost all power and you had nothing else, a hardline is something that's nice, and you see hospitals do that a lot. But you can still do the same concept over satellite. You can take a hardwire phone if they have the wiring already in the building. You can do the ATAs to convert over, and we have appliances that allow them to do that. So if you wanted to connect to a twisted pair, that's fine as well. Certainly I can't say I have as many people going that direction, but the reality is if they have a contingency, I've heard all the concerns from all the different business, continuity AVPs and VPs that I deal with large companies. And that also when you start thinking about PBX failures and those kind of things, that's another one of the contingencies. Was there any questions about voice? I didn't spend any time really on data because I think that's pretty straightforward. It's just a matter of when you look at backing up data, what are the important applications? We'll take one step back on that though. I don't want anyone to think in terms of one-to-one type redundancy for satellite versus a fiber link, for example. If you had a 50 meg fiber link that was 50 megs synchronous, you're not going to replicate that over satellite unless you have a lot of money you're willing to devote to it. Is it technically possible to do that? It is. But from an economical standpoint as a backup, you're probably going to have something that's asymmetrical. You're probably going to have something that's maybe upwards of 25 or 50 megs down. We don't have a lot of people do that, but that's possible. And then maybe 2, 5, or 10 megs up. And so you're not going to support every application that you might have from a operating business day to day. You're certainly not going to do that as your primary, but as a backup, it will keep you in business. It will let you focus on the critical applications that you want to make sure your people can access when they're at the office. And so that's a little bit on data. Video is straightforward. If they have security cameras or maybe they're doing video chats, that kind of thing, they have that capability. I can tell you right now from a backup DR solution, I don't talk to many folks who are that concerned about video. I mean, it's mostly data for emails and notifications, and voice calls. Probably one of the biggest strengths you think about with satellite is I can use the same provider anywhere in the country. I don't have to get the local ILAC. I don't have to find another CLAC who has all these different commitments. I certainly don't have to wait for someone to bring me a connection out. I basically have a service that can be anywhere in the country. If you send me an address, I don't even have to look it up. If it's in the United States or if it's in Hawaii, Alaska, I can tell you right off the bat we have service, right? I can't necessarily tell you what equipment would be until I understand what the application is, but I can tell you we have service. Same for the majority of the Caribbean, almost all of Mexico and most of South America. The only difference is as far as connectivity, there's some very unpopulated parts of Canada, which due to how close they are to the North Pole, they have some issues as far as line of sight to the satellite. So I will tell you it's not the populated areas, but it is for oil and gas companies. I do need to know those addresses, and I have an RF engineer which does blink budgets for me to tell me what we can and can't do. So each satellite we use, we have multiple ones that allow us to pick different services based on what a client might require. But from a standpoint, just think in terms of oil and gas company, for example, because we do a lot with oil and gas companies. pipelines, those kind of things. What are some of the deals they want to do? They want to be able to go out and they want to monitor a particular oil well site or the pipeline. You know, if it breaks, I want to know where it broke. I want to know, be able to get that information back. I don't want to have to send my guy out 4 hours on a drive just to get data back because I can't communicate it with it. Whether that's from their own infrastructure, cellular, or whatever it might be, I can put a satellite connection out there, and there's different forms. There's KU band, there's also L band. Depending on what their data usage is, I can tell them exactly what's going on out there. Conversely, if they need a broadband connection, think in terms of FEMA. I think everybody knows FEMA. If they go out to, let's say, Key West, they lost all communications, or even Puerto Rico for that matter, since that was very recent, they effectively probably have some form of trailer or flyaway auto-acquire antenna unit that they can get to that location. It has a broadband connection via satellite that allows them to do data, voice, and video. And so when I have customers who are doing any of these type applications, whether it's DR or it's full-time, if there's a mobile situation, I don't care where they are, as long as they're within our footprint of our satellite, I can provide them service. And so, you know, it's a niche, right? It's not everybody, you know, but think of fire departments, police departments, they all have mobile command centers. There are hospitals that have mobile clinics. There's certainly a lot of folks who talk about DR, so, well, can I, you know, I've got 50 offices. There's 4 of them that are important. Do I need to buy something for every office? Technically, no, but you got to be able to get something like this to that location. So maybe you have one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast, and then when you need it, you pull it to that location. Yes?
You guys work with cruises as well? You work with cruises as well?
Yeah, you talking for Maritime? The cruises? Yeah. So Maritime is one of the applications we certainly support. I would say that cruise ships almost exclusively utilize satellite for the most part. When they're close to shore, they certainly have the options to use cellular as one of their pieces of communication. But most of them, you'll see these big domes on them. Perfectly, those are what called auto tracking antennas. I will tell you that most of them are going to range anywhere from probably $60,000 to $150,000 for the equipment. But for a cruise ship, they likely have 2 or 3 of them on them. And they might even be having multiple providers providing service. I will tell you, if you went on a cruise 10 years ago, it's a lot different than if you went on a cruise today. I mean, there's a lot more bandwidth that's going out to these ships. And it's not just cruise ships. I've supported the mega yacht lines, which down in Florida, I'm sure there's a few mega yachts that roll around down here. And people with a lot of money don't, you know, it's a great recurring revenue stream for an agent or for me, for that matter. But you absolutely can do it. I think the one thing that's the biggest concern is real estate on the vessel and what kind of broadband do they expect or need. But it's essentially just another data connection and getting the right equipment on board to make that work. A little bit back just to this part. You can take the same concept. You can put an auto-acquire antenna on top of an SUV, on top of a van, an enclosed trailer, a mobile command center. You could even do flyaways, which essentially they come in cases, which you can actually, you have a case for the reflector, you have a case for the rail mount, and then you have a case for the electronics. So you have 3 cases, you can stick that on an airplane and you can fly it somewhere. Now, do a lot of people have that or spend the money to do it? No, but it is certainly an option. And for DR, it's one thing that, you know, we will sell several of those a year to different organizations, so they have them. The whole idea is quick deployment, right? I have an emergency. I need to set up a broadband connection that can support data and voice. I need to be able to give it to X number of people. I need this many phones with it. You know, you pre-configure, you test these things beforehand so you're ready for that emergency. If it's everyday business, a good example is I just got an order today from one of my clients who does oil well monitoring. They'll be at a different oil well from a week to 3 weeks continuously. They got a fleet of 50 of these things, and they all basically just go from one location to the next. And you push a button, the antenna stows, and you get to a new spot, you park, you push it, it goes up, acquired, finds the satellite. 5 to 10 minutes later, they're already back operating again. So there's certainly a little more capital investment for that type capability than the fixed antennas you saw from the beginning. However, you know, for mobility is excellent. I don't care where the cell towers are. I don't care where you are. As long as you're in a place where I'm within the satellite footprint, you'll have the same performance regardless. And there's just an example with the van. In fact, that's one of the vans we support. So that unit on top, that's the antenna. It's stowed. You can't drive around with the thing up. I've seen walls of shame where people have hit bridges and whatever. That's an expensive lesson to learn from someone who didn't push the button. Yes?
Does weather have an impact at all in terms of signal quality?
Absolutely. There is depending on, and it has more impact on certain satellite technologies than others, and that has to do with the frequency that you utilize. So if you're at a higher frequency, you have more susceptibility to rain fade than you are for the lower frequency. So I have some like L-band products and C-band products, which are totally different, but they're very low frequency. They have very minimal to no rain fade issues. It's attenuation from very large raindrops. It's not the case where it sprinkles a little bit or it rains hard. It's a case where you have a big thunder cell that's somehow impeding the line of sight between the satellite and your location. And a lot of times if that happens, if you're sitting in our network operations center, you're seeing the power level availability, and we call it margin, but you see the power margin go down to some finite point where they lose it. And then as soon as the storm rolls through or passes, you see it slowly come back up and reacquires. Generally, that's the summer, springtime related deal that I would say you're going to see more likely in Florida than you would see obviously somewhere out west, right? But it does happen, so I don't want to make a point that it never happens, but the reality of the way we design and operate our network is we try to minimize that to the best we can. And there's some things I won't go into too much detail on, but on the back end, they have basically it's called ACM, and it allows them adaptive code modulation where if X site in Fort Lauderdale needs more power because of a big thunderstorm, I can isolate that site to give it more power than I have for my sites in California or Nevada that don't have any rain. So it's intuitive where it allows you to basically try to minimize that as a whole. So, but it is. It's not satellite TV. It's not like that at all. There's some products though that are called KA band, which you may have heard from VSAT or Hughes, Exceed, HughesNet. They're great for consumer product at home and even for some small to medium-sized businesses, but they operate on K-band, which is a much higher frequency. So for a product like that, they're going to have more rain fade issues than the KU band I'm talking about, or the L band or the C band. But a lot of it depends on area. But if you design and operate a network properly, you can minimize it. You can't eliminate it. It's a physics thing at that point as well. So, but it's certainly something I definitely hear when people say, what happens with rain? So, well, depends on what you're talking about with it. That I don't want to misrepresent it either. I mean, during a hurricane that's blowing 100 to 150 miles an hour, you're more worried about survivability than you are worried about operational at that moment. The antennas that I think I showed a picture of the 1.8 meter earlier, you saw a lot of bricks and stuff around that. Well, that's essentially almost 11 foot by 11 foot square, and it's held down by center blocks and obviously the weight of a steel mount, high wind survivability post, and then the reflector itself. So you're talking about some serious dispersed weight. That's not flying. The only way that's flying off the roof is if the roof's flying off as well. Not saying it's not going to happen, but even in the storms, I mean, we did not lose any non-penetrating roof mounts. There were a couple that got hit by things that we had to replace some stuff that was missing. But as far as people being said, what happens if it blows through? Well, these things have wind survivability, sustained wind survivability. It's rated as 125, but we've been through bigger storms, and I've never seen one come off. So you have to think properly about where you put them, what the roof holds. But the key part is having a good plan and working with a plan ops person or facilities manager or whatever to make sure they understand what's going on top. Back to that, just from mobile scenario, I think it's pretty kind of shows the picture. I drive it, I park it as long as I have a view to the sites. Think of special events too. I mean, I'm in Charlotte where I live. I'm not like this biggest NASCAR fan in the world, but they kind of, a bunch of them run around up there. So I've supported several of their different teams at tracks. They drive around a different racetrack every year. They go and put it up, and boom, they're golden. Now they've kind of moved to fiber at a lot of the tracks now, so they don't use it quite as extensively. But whether it's live, we've supported Live Nation events. We supported, what was it? There was a fishing tournament. I can't think of if it's I can't remember the name of it at the moment, but think of small events for a few days. Well, this is a perfect type scenario where you could support that. You don't have to have it 24/7, 365 days a year. Maybe you just need it for a special event that lasts a couple of days. So if you have the proper equipment, you can support those type things. And just so you know, everybody's familiar with the satellite phone, right? Whether you're climbing Mount Everest or in the middle of the ocean, you know, if I don't have any other coverage, I can make a phone call with a device like that. And it's not a core product by any stretch, but I probably we do a rental program for these. And essentially, someone can get it for a month, they can get it for a seasonal for like 4 months, or they can rent it for a year. They don't have to buy the hardware, which those generally cost, you know, the better ones are going to cost between $1,000 and $1,400. And then some for an airtime plan. We do a rental program where, you know, effectively the minutes are included, and they can pool minutes together if they have multiple devices. And so I probably sent out about 65 or 70 of them with Hurricane Harvey and Irma. And that's not me looking for them. That's people existing customers call me and say, can you help me? And so, I mean, there's a lot of opportunity for me if I really want to do it, but reality is my core product, again, it's going to be the things we're talking about earlier. But if you have that scenario, you have a customer who needs, hey, I'm going to Africa or wherever, these things work globally. So, I mean, you know, I'm going fishing in Alaska and I don't know how good coverage is going to be up there. You can rent a phone for a month and basically pay a couple $100 and you can return it after. As long as you return it, you're good to go. Question?
Those work on airplanes? No.
Well, a traditional satellite phone, which is that, you have to be outside, all right, unless you have a small antenna you can put somewhere. So it's not likely going to work on a plane moving that speed, but you can sometimes get a signal through a window. I don't know about a plane window. I've never tried that. But that's kind of, if you're thinking of DR, I think of it as a day after type thing. The whole world's offline. You know, everything doesn't work. I can walk outside and hopefully get a satellite signal and make a phone call or receive one. A couple of key things we do at the rental program too is we have US-based phone number. So if you're calling it or that, you're not going to get some exorbitant charges from the satellite company that owns it. We use Iridium. There's another company called VSAT. There's Global Star. There's some different ones. But if you call a satellite phone number, you're going to get some big bills, like, you know, $6, $7, $8 per minute type things. With a US-based phone number, it just acts like any other phone. So we include that with it. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. That's, again, not something we do a lot of, but I just wanted you to be aware of that, especially during hurricane season. I've got customers who will rent them for a seasonal for 4 or 5 months and send them back at the end. Has anybody worked with municipalities, whether it's electric, water? You do? Okay. Even waste, you know, waste treatment plants, those kind of things. And then oil and gas pipelines. I mean, you think of these folks and you think of the Internet of Things and what we call SCADA. They have a bunch of sites out there that just have to monitor. And one of the TCG agents I work with, he did this in Tennessee, where he basically has some contacts at one of the towns there, and they had like 5 or 6 sites. Well, they have POTS lines that were basically their phone company, their ILEC there was phasing out or just tripling the cost. That's happening right now all across the country, and especially with these small municipalities. You know, they're losing the ability to keep these lines in place. They need to change this out. Most of our plans that we're looking at, again, I can do L-band or KU-band, but effectively, if you want to be able to monitor those sites, I can do that for certainly less than $100 a month for what they might need. And they would have equipment on site, but I can hit anywhere. So they don't have to worry about the cellular coverage is great here, it's not great there. It's going to be the same every time for mine. Now, if they're not monitoring a pipeline or not monitoring a substation for an energy company, there's all kinds of things people are trying to monitor now. So it's not just utilities. But I think most of us in every town probably have some connectivity with, you know, the county, the city, whatever it might be. And I want you to be aware that that's certainly a very good option. It doesn't always have to be the primary. So cellular is, or LTE is, a good option. It's relatively inexpensive, and it's certainly got coverage that's much better than it used to be. But it's one of those things that, you know, you might have to use multiple people. Well, I've got a cradle point, I've got 3 different carriers. Well, you're paying for 3 different carriers. Use a different diverse path than you have with the cellular option by using satellite. So some of our largest volume, I mean, this is a volume thing, really. I mean, you're not going to have, onesie twosies kind of. I mean, this is going to be something where they probably have 20, 50, maybe even thousands. So, I mean, we have all kinds of solutions at scale and keep this very affordable. And just to mention, I was talking with Robert a little bit. He's got something for mobile VSAT we were talking about in West Virginia, but there's also this little box, and you can see that in the corner. And that's actually bigger than it probably is in your hand. It's like this big. But that's what's called L-band. And if you have people who are doing like 10, to monitoring the site once a day or something, make sure it's still there. Maybe 20 megabits of usage in a month. I mean, this is a product where essentially you don't need the big antenna. So those kind of options are available out there as well. And then fleet management, I don't know if I just put this is one slide we use sometimes, but if you want to track trucks, you want to track fleet, that kind of stuff, this is essentially a mobile thing that can tell you all the different telemetry data you might want and speed data, that kind of thing. Same technology as that L-band piece. And so really I want to stop showing you slides and ask you, I appreciate the interaction you've had so far. But, like I said, I mentioned, yes, your question?
Yeah. Who are some of your direct competitors and the differences and maybe where you guys play in the market?
Sure, and there are plenty. I would say, let's be honest, I mean, satellite is somewhat of a niche and it depends on what part of the market you're in. We squarely are in enterprise and government. All right, we are not the mom and pop type clientele. Think Fortune 1000 companies, think private companies that have some money, and are really, if they go down, they're going to lose a lot. Some of the competitors that you've probably heard of, I think I mentioned earlier, Hughes and VSAT, good companies. They actually have billions of dollars of sales. They have hundreds of thousands of customers, but they're probably more in the market competing against Comcast and Spectrum than they are competing against me. They do have some government and enterprise type customers, but that KE-band product I was referring to earlier, that's not what I do. That's really a good plan for me at home, working at my office or a small business in fairly remote areas. But if I'm looking to enterprise type customer, I'm using KU-band for the most part in the U.S. There's a lot of players about our company's size. I mean, there's names you likely haven't heard of. I mean, there's very few public companies that do what we do. There's a wide group of Beltway bandits, which I think y'all probably heard that term before, that focus strictly on the U.S. government and DoD. The U.S. government's the largest user of satellite broadband in the world and have been forever. I mean, they use more than any. They have their own satellites and then they buy a bunch of commercial bandwidth space as well. But I would say unless we're dealing with DoD or government, we're likely not competing with them. Any of those type things are going to come with some RFP, and the reality is, unless you know the person writing the RFP, you're going to have a hard time winning a government contract, and there's all kinds of different issues with that. But our focus is really more the oil and gas, the utilities, the healthcare, the finance. We certainly work within our industry a lot. We actually run other people's hubs too, but as far as the standpoint of being able to give them connectivity, think of me more as a niche transport for backup and machine to machine and mobility and maritime versus I can get a cheap broadband connection for my house. Let's call Scott. I'm happy for you to call. I'm probably not going to be the guy who's going to be able to give you a solution to fit that particular need.
So state and local government will be a good target for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Either as backup for like their EOC or their fire department, the mobility solutions for if they have a mobile command center for SWAT or police or fire department. Tracking EMS, some of the tracking pieces. And then really for the utility, the wastewater, most counties in the wastewater part. Might not the electric, but the SCADA monitoring of those is vital. I mean, those are very regulated industries. They can't not monitor them, right? So if you're in a place that's, we're getting ready to do a trial in Polk County here in Florida. So yeah, they're going to be doing both the L-band and the KU-band options to see which one works best, and they probably have a mix. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. I've got multiple platforms I can use, and really it comes down to if you can identify the customer, I'm interested where they are. I'm interested in the number of sites, and if there's any possible way, if it's like SCADA or machine to machine, if they have any kind of historical information on how much throughput they had on a particular site in a month, I do care about that because most of our stuff is usage-based to a degree. So depending on what it was, I'd say how much usage they have, and I'll tell you which product I think best fits. But I'm happy to help, and I want to stress that. I've been doing this since 2005. I was in some telecommunications before. I've been in other industries as well. So I've been in IT a long time. But I don't expect any of you to walk out and talk to some guy because I email you a brochure or a rate card and expect you to be able to tell the ins and outs of satellite. I want to help you close business, right? So if you have what you feel is a legit opportunity, I'll give you my card and email, and I can send you anything. I've got some brochures and stuff, but I can send you anything via email that I can hand out to you today. I'm happy to help. We can talk individually first, and then if you think it's a legit opportunity, I can spend time talking with you and your customer, and probably by phone. Admittedly, I'm not going to fly all over the country, have a bunch of meetings unless it's big. I don't have the time or the ability to get everywhere, but I'm happy to help. And then I can, of course, set up technical calls with my engineering staff if we progress to the point where there is legitimate interest. So that's the best way to close it. The ones that I've been involved with from TC agents that have closed, I've worked directly with the agent and their end user. And we're working on a couple of really big things right now that could easily be couple six-figure a month type recurring revenue things, which in turn is what you get commission-wise through TCG. Those are exciting. Now those are not every day, right? But I think it's a great incremental option for you, right? You're selling a lot of Comcast, MPLS, whatever it might be. This is something that if I've already sold them that, I can walk in and say, what do you do for your DR and backup plans? Well, I get service from Spectrum or something else. I said, well, what happens if all the local stuff falls? This is my diverse path. This is what gives me that other option. And so, not going to be for everybody. Not everybody's concerned about being down a couple days or whatever. But I can tell you there's some. If it affects their bottom line and it affects people's lives, those are the industries that I target for that. Other questions? How much time have I? I feel like I've been talking for a long time. Am I past like 40 minutes? I don't know. But we can wrap it up. I'll give each of you my card before we leave. Feel free to call me, email me, whatever you'd like to do. And certainly hope we can find a way to give you a healthy commission on this kind of thing as well. But it's a pleasure meeting everybody, and thank you.